All right, thank you everyone. Just to let you know, we are recording today's session, so everything will be recorded and posted on our YouTube later. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I am Dr. Mitch Habza, Senior Program Manager of Distinguished Graduate Fellowships at ASU's Office of National Scholarship Advisement. And what that means is I work with undergraduate and graduate students who are currently applying to graduate level fellowships, so fellowships that support graduate study. And the awards we're going to be talking about today are awards that you can apply to as a senior while applying to graduate school. And that these awards can support you once you start graduate school. Right. So what do we mean when we start talking about national scholarships and fellowships? So these are awards that are external to ASU. That means that they are not managed by our office. We don't own them. We don't hand out the money. We don't make decisions about any of this. We don't review the essays or in any decision-making capacity. Instead, what we do is we advise students to apply to them. So they are external to ASU. They're often owned or operated by different foundations. Sometimes these can be industry awards. Sometimes these are philanthropic awards. And what is available for each award will vary based on what the foundation is offering and what the foundation's mission is. And we'll talk a little bit more about mission in a second. They are competitive. So this generally means that you are competing with other applicants and that there's a limited number of opportunities. So everyone who applies does not get one. So for example, for the NSF GRFP, which is an award that we'll be talking about today, that's available both for students in STEM and the social sciences. They get about 13,000 applications a year, and they offer about 2,000 to 3,000 fellowships a year. So that is, a 10,000 person difference between who applies and who is and who becomes a fellow later. They are also merit-based, so they're not needs-based. So if you are in financial need, these are not the awards to apply to because they are competitive. You're not guaranteed to get one. So if you're like, I really need money for next semester, this isn't the award to be able to solve that problem. Generally, because they are merit-based, you have to be the applicant that they're looking for. So many of these awards are looking for leaders in the field, people who are going to really change things, shake things up, who have a vision for what they think their contributions are going to be for their field. And so that's the kind of leaders that they want to support for these awards. And that will vary from award to award for what they're looking for. But generally, they are merit-based. They are mission-driven. So each of these awards has a different mission, and how applicants can fulfill that mission is a major part of why the award exists. So these awards exist, they have chosen not to give money into solving the problems, but instead investing in people who can solve these kinds of social problems or enact the kind of leadership that they would like to see enacted to make social change. And we'll talk about each mission for the awards that we're talking about today. They are also extremely prestigious. What that means is this is a way to demonstrate that you are different from the peers in your field. Receiving one of these awards shows that you have gone through a review process, that readers have thought that you are, cream of the crop, you are at the top, and they have decided to give you recognition for your achievements, but also your potential. It's not just about achievement. These are not lifetime achievement awards, but instead it's your potential to be a future leader. And so fellowships in that sense are a little bit different than a grant. So a fellowship is investing in a person's development. It's giving them access to opportunities so that they can continue to grow, whereas a grant is literally just for research most of the time. So it's like, here's some funding for you to go buy lab equipment or pay your participants. And what we're talking about today are fellowships, awards that invest in people. And so what does it mean to invest in people? Well, that varies from award to award. So one thing that we often say in response to many of the questions that we get about awards is it depends. So much depends on the specific award, the applicant, the context in which the applicant and the award exists. And so there's a lot of variables here. Overall, though, many of these awards can provide funding. And so when you apply to graduate school, many times applicants or students who are in graduate school get their funding by either being a teaching assistant or a research assistant, a graduate assistant, or some kind of other arrangement in which the institution is paying them to work for the institution as a teacher, as a research assistant, etc. And then they get a stipend, to pay for their cost of living and a tuition reimbursement. And what that looks like will vary from program to program, department to department, and how much availability there is for those opportunities also varies from program to program and department to department. Sometimes not all programs and departments have enough funding to give those opportunities to every single one of their graduate students. Other times, these programs or departments won't accept graduate students unless if they can give them a stipend and an RA or a TA-ship. So that will vary from institution to institution. And that's something for you to think about as you're applying to graduate school. How are you going to make a living while you're attending graduate school? And so these awards can offer a stipend so you don't have to be an RA or a TA for the duration of the award. They also provide access. And so that can be access to networking opportunities. It can be access to events. It depends on the award and what they offer. It can also provide experience. So some of the awards that we're going to talk about today are experiential. You go and study abroad, or you conduct an internship. For the NSF GRFP, becoming a fellow does give you access to applying to internships through the NSF later. And so that there are different opportunities that you can pursue to continue to advance as a researcher in your field. They also can provide training. And that's similar to experience. So when we talk about the GEM Fellowship today, there is an internship component to the GEM Fellowship, which will provide you with training for research. And they provide status. So earlier I said they were prestigious, and that's what we mean by status too, is that it is something that demarcates you from other peers in your field. It says that you have been selected, that the readers consider you to be a certain kind of leader or specialist in your area, and that you're going to go and make change. And that kind of status can open other doors for you that may not be available for folks who do not have these awards. And that's one reason why they're so highly competitive. So what do we do at the Office of National Scholarships Advisement? We promote national scholarships and fellowships, such as the information session that you are sitting in today. There are many, many, many awards out there, and we promote some of these awards to the larger ASU population. And also when students find some awards that we may not be promoting, we're happy to talk with them about how we can support their application for those awards. We target and recruit ASU applicants. So all of you today got an email inviting you to this opportunity. And so we, use our data, find students who may be interested in these awards, and share this information with you all. We advise ASU students and alumni through the application process. So some of the awards I'm going to be talking about today, you can apply to after you graduate. And so if you're taking a gap year and then you're choosing to apply to graduate school maybe a year from now, as opposed to this fall, we'll still work with you on those applications because we're your most recent institution. So that's something to keep in mind. We also manage nomination processes. Only one of the awards I'm going to be talking about today has a nomination process, which is the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. And what a nomination process means is that you have to go work with our office, go through a process in which your application is reviewed, and then we at the office and the university say, this applicant has gone through a nomination process. We have worked with the student, we think that they have a strong application, we are putting them forward. And so that's what a nomination process is. And so we manage those nomination processes when awards require them at our institution. We also develop programming and curriculum for ASU students. So many of us in our office are specialists in writing, and so we work with applicants on their writing. We provide a lot of writing feedback. The director and I actually co-taught a class this last spring in the Honors College on writing, and so we do a lot of work with writing in our office. And so that's part of our programming and curriculum. We also have other events in which you can come and learn and think about how you are advancing your goals and do some reflection, but also learn how to put together the documents that we're talking about today. So as I said previously, national scholarships and fellowships are very competitive. That is just something to consider. Don't let that be discouraging. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try if you think that you are a viable applicant. And that's something to talk with us about. We can help you decide whether it is worth your time for one of these applications. They are very competitive. And what that means is that you are up against a lot of different applicants in the pool. However, that's also a subjective process. We don't have control over how readers are reading your application. We don't have control over who is reading the application, and we don't have control over who else is in that stack, right? So reviewers get a stack of 20, 30 essays. We don't know who the other 29 people are. And so what we try to do in our office is help you put forth the best competitive application you can that best represents your talents and ambitions. And that takes some work. And we'll talk about work in a second. But that is how you can be competitive in this atmosphere, is putting in the work. Also working with advisors who can give you expertise on how to put together a competitive application, and also working with your faculty mentors to make sure that you are representing your knowledge of the field in the best way that you can. We will not always win these awards. And we have to plan as if we're not going to win them. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So for example, if you're like, I really want the NSF-GRP and I'm going to get it, and that's it, and I'm honing my focus in on that. If you don't get it, you may be disappointed by that, right? And while that is disappointing, it's not necessarily a reflection on you or your value as a student, as someone in your field, right? I have known excellent students who have not gotten some of these awards, but they have found the application process to be very valuable because the application process helped them better understand who they are and better explain what they're all about to a broader audience. And we'll talk more about the value of the application process later. Fact number 2, the application process can be challenging. So there are going to be challenges. You are probably going to be asked questions by advisors that you might not have answers for yet. And you're going to have to sit and do some thinking. You're going to have to do a lot of revisions. The goal in our office is not for you to get an A. This is not a teacher-student relationship. These essays are not homework that we're giving you, right? Instead, these application essays are things that we are trying to put together to best represent you and yourself, your narrative and your goals and your research agenda. And there's going to be a lot of feedback on how to improve that and make sure that those essays really stand out from the pack. You don't read these essays for a living, so you don't know that you may be saying what everyone else is saying in their application, right? We do, because we read these essays for a living. And so we give you that expert feedback on how to really craft a unique essay that's going to help you stand out from other applicants. That can be a challenge. And so one thing you want to think about is accepting the challenge and being like, okay, this is something I can work with. This is a way that I can advance my own goals, learn more about myself, and improve as a writer. And I'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end of the presentation too. And you must be prepared to work hard. It does require hard work. And that's just something to know from the get-go. There will be multiple rounds of revision. There will be challenges. You will have to think really, really hard about your purpose and what you're doing. You do have to be specific. You will have to outline goals that may be a little challenging to outline right now because maybe you don't really know what you want to do with the rest of your life. And that's okay. We help you figure out a narrative that says, this is one thing I could do that makes sense for this application. So when it is a challenge and you have to work hard, it's not because we want to make your lives more difficult for you. It's just we want to help you put together a competitive application. And we're not thinking about this like a homework assignment in which, yep, you got your A, you wrote the essay at the end of the semester. We'll never think about this ever again. It's a different kind of writing because it has a different kind of outcome than just trying to pass a class. All right, so ANSA is here to help. We are here to help at every step of the process. We can help you with brainstorming. We can help you with deciding whether or not you want to apply to something. We can also help you at the tail end of everything, doing revisions, doing some editing. And then after it's submitted, we want to celebrate your submission. We don't just celebrate winners. We celebrate everyone who goes through the entire process and walks through the process with us and puts in all that hard work. That's what we want to celebrate. That's what we really value. And we're really here to help applicants at every step of the way. And so we want to hear your results too. And even if those results may be disappointing, we're happy to talk with you about that and your next steps, right? And so we're here for every step of the way. And think about how everyone else is here to help too. You probably have a community of folks who can help you put together a competitive application, including faculty mentors, mentors you may have encountered in your labs. You may currently be working with graduate students in a lab, and you may be currently working with recipients of some of these awards. And we're all here to help you put together a really good application. All you have to do is just open up a conversation and start talking about it with folks too. Don't suffer in silence. If you're meeting challenges in your application, you're not sure what to do, don't put it off for a couple of weeks and try to come back at it a week before a deadline. That's not really the solution to the problem, right? Be proactive and seek help. All right, fact number 4, we do win. So here over the past 10 years are some stats about our different winners for different awards. So we've had 3 Rhodes Scholars, 5 Marshall Scholars, 6 Gates Cambridge Scholars, 1 Churchill Scholar, 12 Udall Scholars, 21 Goldwater Scholars, 34 Dodd Rise recipients, 41 Boren Scholars, and 180 Fulbright recipients. And these numbers are changing every year. Actually, I think those Fulbright numbers are outdated now. We should add 16 more people to that. So that's 196. So we are successful. And the reason that we're successful is because we put in a lot of work with our applicants. We really try to match you all for the work that you're putting into your application. So if you are going full force, really putting in all of the effort that you can while balancing everything else you have to do as a busy student, we're here to match that with you and put in just as much work as you're putting in. We really want you all to do the best that you can do. Go back just for a second. It's also worth mentioning that the institution also recognizes that our office is successful. And that's one reason why our office exists, is because the institution wants you to succeed. And so we exist because the institution wants you to be able to go forward and apply for these awards and be competitive too, right? So this is part of the larger framework of how ASU wants to create future leaders in the sciences, in the STEM and social sciences. Right. So what do you do when you start getting started? I know we haven't talked about any specific awards yet, and we're about to transition into talking about some of the specific awards for graduate study in STEM and the social sciences in a second. But when you're getting started, you have to always set your own goals, right? Because these awards should align with your goals. You don't want to apply to something whose mission is drastically different than what you want to do with the rest of your life, right? It's a reciprocal relationship. It's not just saying, I'm a good fit for your award. It's also saying your award is a good fit for me, right? It's about what you can do for the award. And so you want to know what your objective is. What is the desired impact you want to have in the world? What is the change you want to make in the world? That's true north on your compass. That's the thing that helps guide you and helps keep you focused throughout the application process. This is where we're going. This is where this is all going, and here's why it matters. And it's really important to communicate the stakes and why it matters to your readers. Many times when I'm giving feedback, I'm kind of like a toddler. I'm like, why does this matter? Why does this matter? Why does this matter? And the reason why I ask that so many times is because we really want to make it clear what your objective is to your readers. You want to explore your available resources. So look around you. What faculty can support you in this application? How can ANSA support you in this application? Do you want to go to your writing center? What other ways can you work on the application and get support for that application? Make lists. Think about the awards that you want to apply to. When are they due? Many of them are due in October, around the same time that you are applying to graduate schools. Make lists of the graduate schools you want to apply to. What graduate schools are you applying to? Which programs are at the top of your list? For some of these awards, you kind of do have to pick one program and write into it, even though that might not be where you're going, just to give the application a little bit more cohesion and focus. You want to seek advising. Talked about that endlessly, but yes, please work with us on your application and craft a timeline. Figure out, what do you need to do in the next couple of weeks? If it's due on October 17th, what do we need to do between now and October 17th to be able to put together a competitive application? I often encourage applicants to meet with me once a week, once every 2 weeks, to keep making progress, have that accountability check-in. And so we offer many ways in which you can also be accountable for putting together an application and progressing through that timeline. Right, so the first award we're going to talk about today is the one that most broadly reaches everyone who could be the audience for this presentation, which is the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship. So the NSF supports research in STEM, social and behavioral sciences, and STEM education. And this can be very broad. So for example, in social sciences, they include linguistics. So you do want to go and look at their website and make sure your field of study fits in with these broad categories. There's many subfields of research that they support. However, they do not necessarily support medically adjacent research. They do make some exceptions because what they care about is the development of theoretical knowledge. So if you are advancing a tool that could be used for medical outcomes, then we want to focus on the advancement of the tool. And so they make some exceptions for biomedical engineering and other areas that are adjacent to medicine. But if anything has any kind of diagnosis, treatment, policy outcomes for health, they're not interested in that. If you have any questions about that, don't count yourself out. Have a conversation with me about it, and we'll figure out whether this is worth your time or not. But overall, they support research in STEM, social and behavioral sciences, and STEM education. It's a 5-year fellowship, and they have 3 years of funding for graduate study. master's and PhD students. And so as an undergraduate, if you have not started graduate school yet, you can apply as many times as you want to. Once you start a graduate program, either a master's program or a PhD program, you are limited to one application. So sometimes when I'm working with undergraduates who are thinking about applying, they hear from someone who says, you should wait until you get into graduate school to apply because you'll have a better sense of what you want to do in that graduate school. That's fair advice. That's good advice. However, you only get that one application. So I encourage undergraduates to apply before starting graduate school because, hey, it's another chance to get it. And if you don't get it, you get reviewer feedback that you can apply the next time that you apply in graduate school. Otherwise, if you just wait for that one time in graduate school, you get the reviewer feedback and you can't actually apply it to another NSF GRFP application, right? So this is all about preparation, getting practice, but also hoping you get it the first time. And so why don't we increase our chances rather than just waiting and getting in when we get into a graduate program? And one thing to keep in mind with the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship is that they're here, their mission is to support future leaders in STEM. So they're really looking for folks who understand their field, understand how to make a contribution to knowledge in their field, but also desire to make a broader social impact. And so the two criteria for the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship are intellectual merit and broader impacts. And intellectual merit is the advancement of knowledge, not just in your field, but potentially in other fields. If your desired research can affect other fields, and broader impact. So how have you been making a broader impact in your community? How have you been making a broader impact through your research? And how do you plan to continue making those broader impacts in the future? And so they're really looking for folks who are going to be leaders in the academy and industry in the future. It is an annual stipend of $37,000. That's pretty competitive. That's nice. And so for 3 years, you get a $37,000 stipend to cover your cost of living while you get to focus on your own research. For the other 2 years of a PhD program, you can be an RA, you can be a TA, you can work with your program. So you're still getting that teaching experience, that research experience that's really important on the job market later once you finish the PhD. But you do get 3 years to focus on what you want to do. And I have heard from fellows here at ASU that that is so valuable for their development as researchers. It also includes a cost of education allowance of $16,000 to the institution. Now, here's one thing that will vary from award to award is what happens once you get it and how that applies at the institution. And so it's $16,000 to the institution each year towards tuition. That goes directly to the institution. You don't see that money at all, right? You only see it in the sense that you don't have to worry about paying for part of your education. At some institutions, they waive the rest of it. So at ASU, when someone has an NSF GRP fellowship, NSF gives $16,000 a year for that fellow's tuition, and ASU waives the rest of it. That may not be the case at other institutions, but that's the case here. There is no postgraduate study service requirement. You don't have to do anything for the NSF when you're done. You're not obligated to work for them or obligated to work for the State Department or the government in any way. However, you are expected to go out and conduct kinds of research that will have a positive social impact. And then they also provide access to supplemental funding to sustain research while a medical deferral. So there is, I think there is health insurance, there is medical family leave, there's all kinds of other benefits. And those benefits also vary from institution to institution. So for example, at ASU, fellows get $750 a year for research funding. So it's just like a small research grant each year. You can use it to buy equipment, anything that you need to purchase in order to support your research, and that's stackable. So it transfers over from each year to each year. It's not just you have $750 this year to spend, that's it. But that's at ASU. So many of these extra benefits are going to vary from institution to institution. It depends on where you end up for graduate school. So we already talked about some of the basic eligibility requirements, which is as an undergraduate, you can apply as many times as you want to. As a graduate student, you only get to apply once. Some of the other eligibility requirements include being a US citizen. And I think that's about it. It gets much more complicated once you get into graduate school about the window of which you can apply. If you have not started a graduate program yet, it really is, you're a US citizen, you are in one of these fields, please apply. And you can find more about their supported fields and their solicitation. They have an entire list of it. Oh, realized I didn't talk about what's actually involved in the application. So the application for the NSF GRFP includes 2 essays. One is a personal statement, it's 3 pages. The other one is a research plan, which is 2 pages. And notice the language, research plan, not proposal, because you're an undergraduate. You don't know what graduate school you've gotten into yet. You don't know what faculty you're going to be working with. You really don't know what resources are at the institution yet, right? And so what they want to see is your ability to put together a plan. Can you pose an appropriate research question in your area? Can you outline appropriate methods and methodology to answer that research question or hypothesis? Can you project aims and outcomes that show that you'll know when you'll be successful at answering your research question? And can you demonstrate the intellectual merit and broader impacts of said research? It's a plan. And so they just want to know, can you demonstrate that you've done your homework and you know how to participate in the academic discourse of your field? There are other components of the application, and if you're interested in working on this award, it is due in mid-October. Please let me know as soon as possible so we can get you set up. We have a Canvas course that has materials for applying to the NSF GRFP. We have peer review sessions. Some of our fellows are going to be volunteering this year to be able to give you all feedback on your application materials. And I provide a lot of writing feedback on these application materials as well. Since it is due in mid-October, we want to get started on the application sooner rather than later. Applicants who wait until the last minute to start on this find that it is a challenging application. It's 5 pages of writing, which may not seem that much if we're just binge writing overnight, turning it in and never thinking about it again. But here we are going to be doing a lot of revisions to put together a competitive application. So there is a lot of work to put into this application. All right. So the mission of the GEM Fellowship is to increase access in the industry and in academia. And so there are fellowships available for historically underrepresented students for either masters in engineering and STEM or PhDs in engineering and STEM. And I would encourage you all to look at the website to see how they define historically underrepresented. The stipends will vary. There's some examples of stipends on this slide, but there's also 3 different levels of fellowships. And so some of them support internships, some of them support just a stipend, and some of them offer some other kinds of financial support. And what is available to you as an applicant depends on the institution that you end up at. So GEM has different agreements with different institutions. And so there isn't a one-size-fits-all GEM award. There's just 3 tiers, and what is available is different at every institution. Generally, they will provide full tuition and fees. It will be provided by a GEM University member. But again, that changes from university to university as to what's offered. There are summer internships. So the major component of the top tier award for GEM is that you go and conduct a summer internship with leaders in research and industry. And so that includes like 3M, really competitive, renowned research labs, other kinds of businesses, and industry leaders. And then you gain access to a GEM alumni network and meetups with GEM fellows. So one of our GEM fellows has been working with us on another application, and I've been talking with him while he's been completing his internship this summer, and he really had a blast. He learned so much, and I think it really did change the way in which he thinks about research and the ways that he's going to continue to think about research afterwards. These are transformative experiences. And last fall, I was fortunate enough to go to a GEM Consortium conference here in Phoenix. It was at the Renaissance Hotel, and that network and those meetups, that's serious. This is a really committed network to applicants, to fellows, and they really want to see you all thrive and succeed. And this is one of the fellowships that allows you to reapply multiple times too. So that's something to keep in mind too. It's very flexible, it's very open, because it really wants the students that it's targeting to be able to succeed and participate in industry in the academy. This award is due in November. It requires you entering some information into a award portal, uploading your resume, writing a 1-page statement of grant purpose, and some other information. They also ask that you include your GRE scores if possible, because they want you all to be as competitive as possible when you apply to graduate school. And if you are interested in applying to this award, please just reach out, schedule an appointment with me, and we can get you started on that application. The Quad Fellowship is a newer fellowship. So it is a collaboration between 4 countries, the US, India, Japan, and Australia. They had their first inaugural cohort last year. ASU had 2 recipients of that award, and you'll see one of them, Samantha Harker, on this slide. She's really awesome and doing really cool research, and we're so excited for her to be a Quad Fellow. So this one is only open to students in STEM. You can apply as a master's or PhD student. If you are applying as a senior, you do have to have a bachelor's degree in hand while you're applying. So that's something to keep in mind. You probably apply to this one more as a PhD student or as a master's student. It's only 1 year of funding. But the whole idea of Quad, what their mission is to build collaborative networks between the 4 countries by bringing 25 researchers from each country together. So that's 100 total, and for one summer opportunity, and also providing a $50,000 stipend for 1 year. So you're on a 1 year fellowship, and you are able to go to a retreat, meet all the other fellows, and collaborate with them. We're still waiting to hear from Sammy what happened this summer. It was the first year that they ran it. And so there's a lot that we're excited to learn about this award. It does also provide access to programming, research, and internship and career opportunities in the Quad countries. So they do say that there is networking. Again, we're still learning what that looks like with this award. And it gives you permanent membership in the Quad Alumni Network, which I'm sure will grow as this award continues to exist and progress. It is open to students from the US, India, Japan, and Australia. So one thing to keep in mind is GEM, NSF-GRFP, and the next fellowship, Hertz, only open to US citizens. This is an award that is open to US citizens and international students from India, Japan, and Australia. They have not announced the next deadline for this, so keep an eye out. You can sign up for updates on their website. And if you're interested in applying to Quad and working with our office, email us when they send out an update that says we're announcing when the next application is opening. All right, so the Hertz Fellowship. It is open to PhD students in STEM, and you can apply as a senior who is seeking to also apply to PhD programs. The Hertz Fellowship is particularly interested in urgent, near-term problems facing the US. And so when you become a Hertz Fellow, you make a moral commitment to supporting the US in a time of crisis. What that means is contextual, because different crises happen throughout time, right? But the Hertz Fellowship is particularly interested in research that has a social impact that is immediate, is trying to solve problems. So we had a semifinalist last year, and her specific research was on trying to find new diagnostics and novel treatments for Lyme disease, which is a growing issue because there's more and more ticks because of climate change, right? And so that is a problem that we're facing more and more, is that people are being diagnosed with Lyme disease, and we need to find new treatments for it. So they're looking for near-term solutions for problems that are urgent. It's a 1 year PhD fellowship that is renewable up to 5 years. So it's not just one time like the Quad, and it's not just 3 years like the NSF-GRFP. You just have to renew it each year. The stipend varies. It starts at $38,000. It can be combined with the NSF-GRFP. Excuse me. Some of these awards don't play nice with others. So some of them are like, we're the only game in town, you can only use us. And some others are like, yeah, you can combine us with something else. And that just depends on the nature of the award, and it varies from award to award and where the funding is coming from. Most of the time, if the award is from the US State Department, you can't combine it with other federal funding because we don't want people stacking up a lot of federal funding. We want to distribute that as widely as possible to make sure as many people are getting access to it. It also includes full tuition equivalent at participating institutions. So one thing I've been really driving home during this talk is that these awards look different at each institution. Hertz is not available at every institution. They do have a list. It's very easy to find on their website as to which institutions are included. ASU is right at the top because it's an alphabetical order. However, they do say that they are willing to work with finalists if the institution is not on the list. However, that doesn't always work out. I heard from someone last week who wasn't able to make that successful at their own institution outside of ASU. So something to consider as you're applying to graduate school. Are you applying to awards on that list? The Hertz is also really highly competitive, and I want to emphasize that. It's more competitive than GEM and far more competitive than the NSF-GRFP. And so it's a limited number. I think it's only 25 fellows a year, really looking for leaders who are, working on solving those near-term problems, as I said. And there is an interview as part of this process. So the application process is a series of essays, some short answers, a bunch of different questions about your motivations, the impact of your research. And I've worked with applicants on those essays. And also, if you are selected as a semifinalist, you do conduct an interview, and it is highly technical. They will ask you to talk about scientific equations and solve math problems on the spot, because they really want to make sure that you know your science, right? And we are here to also help prepare students for mock interviews. So if you have an interview for any of these applications, we do mock interviews with you. While we are not scientists and we won't be able to ask you a lot of highly technical questions, we can just help you prepare for a general interview. And let me just mention, this one is also due in October. It's due about a week after the NSF GRFP. So if you are interested in applying to Hertz, please make an appointment with me as soon as possible. This one is also only open to US citizens. The Fulbright US Student Program. So Fulbright is part of a big global program started at the end of World War II. So William J. Fulbright, who was a US Senator, decided that we needed to figure out how to build better international relations in the wake of World War II. And his big idea was to create a truly novel international exchange program in which US citizens could go and study abroad, teach English abroad, conduct research abroad. Faculty could go and conduct their research abroad through other Fulbright programs, but also that we use Fulbright as a way to bring international students into the US to study in the US. And the idea here is that we're not leaving diplomacy just to diplomats who work at the United Nations, but instead build international diplomatic connections between everyday people. Because when we meet someone from another country and we see them as a person who is equal to us, we learn so much more about that culture than we can from just reading a book or listening to a podcast about that culture, right? And so it's leaving international diplomacy to everyday people. And that is at the core of the Fulbright mission, is how do we build mutual understanding with others? And so Fulbright offers 3 different grants for US students. You can apply as an English teaching assistant, you can apply to go conduct independent study research, and you can also apply to go study a graduate program overseas. So like 1-year master's programs can be covered through a Fulbright grant. You must complete a nomination process with ANSA. You also must be a US citizen. And the application process has already closed for this year. So it is due September 12th. That is not enough time to be able to put together a competitive application. So we are no longer taking intake appointments on that. However, if you are interested in applying next year, that application cycle begins in March. We have Fulbright Day. We begin working with applicants in April and May, and we encourage you all to work on it throughout the summer. And this is one of the awards that we frequently work with alumni on. So folks will graduate, decide that they want to apply, and you choose one country, one application type per application cycle. But as a US citizen, once you have your bachelor's degree, you can apply as many times as you want to through Fulbright, as long as you don't hold a PhD degree. That's a completely other program once you have that PhD degree in hand. The stipends and awards vary from country to country, so there's a lot of flexibility for proposals. There is so much flexibility with what you can do through Fulbright. So NSF GRFP, Hertz, GEM, pretty narrow in what they say you can do and what you're proposing to do. It has to be in your field. It has to be a graduate program in the US. However, Fulbright is incredibly flexible with what you propose, and it gives you a lot of creativity to be able to do what you want to do. You can build foundations for long-term international networks. So they're not interested in what we call helicopter research, where you go into a country and say, I'm conducting research, and now I'm going to fly away, and you all will never hear from me again. Instead, this is for folks who are really interested in maintaining long relationships. So if you are a social scientist and you are studying a culture overseas, Fulbright is the avenue to be able to go do in-depth research and engagement that will help you build long-term relationships with those communities. It also will help you advance foreign language proficiency and cultural competency, which are really good skills to have on the job market. Again, Fulbright is not open anymore for this year, but if you are interested, consider applying next year, and we will begin that application process in the spring. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and transition to talking about why you should consider getting writing support from ANSA. And so I turned to one of my favorite articles, which is The Science of Scientific Writing, which is where 2 scientists outline how to improve dense technical scientific writing. It is one of the most cited articles in the journal that it was published in, and it really is truly a very effective article. And so they argue that the fundamental purpose of scientific discourse is not the mere presentation of information and thought, but rather its actual communication. So we're not just putting a bunch of science on paper and just saying, here's all my equations, here's all my methods. You actually have to make sure you're communicating that to your audience. Why are you using those methods? What are they supposed to do with this data? And it does not matter how pleased an author might be to have converted all the right data into sentences and paragraphs. It matters only when a large majority of the reading audience accurately perceives what the author had in mind. Therefore, in order to understand how best to improve writing, we would do well to understand better how readers go about reading. And that's what we're really here to support. How do readers go about reading? As fellowships advisors, we have access to networks. We have access to representatives at foundations. We hear how readers have responded to these applications. We read their feedback. And so we do have a certain level of expertise about this specific audience. Audiences for your writing vary based on what the writing is for, what the purpose is, and who you are writing to. And so we have a lot of knowledge about how readers go about reading these applications, and we try to impart that knowledge to you as you're working on your application materials. While we may not be content experts in your field, getting feedback from us can be very valuable because you can't expect content experts in your field to also be experts on how these application processes work and how competitive these awards are and what these readers are looking for. Additionally, I'll add some of these awards are also writing for a broad audience. So for Fulbright, you're not writing to other scientists, generally most of the time. So you have to explain your scientific research to a broad academic audience. Whereas for Hertz and the NSF, it's a little bit more of a specialized audience, but but you have to consider that they're reading very quickly. So they still don't want dense technical material, right? So it is about balancing for your specific audience, and we can give you a lot of insight on that. So earlier I touched on, the difference between working with a faculty mentor and a fellowships advisor, and this chart illustrates that, right? So faculty mentors can be very good at helping you figure out, how do you talk about a hypothesis in your field? How do you talk about methods and methodology? How do you talk about outcomes? I'm going to ask questions like, what are your methods? What's your justification for those? And if you're like, well, Dr. Hobson, my justification for using these methods is this, I'm going to go, oh, okay, that's interesting. I can't tell you whether that's a good justification or not, right? But your faculty mentors can. So they're there as those content experts to make sure that you are representing your knowledge of your field accurately. Whereas as fellowship advisors, we're genre experts. So we can tell you about readers' expectations, which I just talked about extensively. We also can review selection criteria with you. Are you actually addressing what they're looking for in this application? Sometimes they will give you a long list of everything that they are looking for in an application. They're going to ask you 20 questions that they want to see addressed, and they don't want to see that addressed like a grocery list, right? So we make sure that you are addressing that cohesively and clearly in your essays. How to avoid cliches. So everyone's passionate about their research. Everyone loves their research, right? Everyone says that. You don't know that because you don't read these for a living, right? There are so many other cliches in these essays, and we're here to help you figure that out too. We'll tell you, you know what? Everyone else has said this in their application. Let's try not to say it that way. Let's say it a different way. You're not going to know that unless if you work with us on those application materials. We also help with clarity. We work on writing all the time. We have lots of tools and resources and gimmicks and tricks to help you put your writing together as clearly as possible. Take advantage of that. And because many of us have degrees in English or in fields that are adjacent to English, we help you also figure out how to put together a compelling narrative. What's a really powerful story that tells a reader who you are and what you're about? Because remember, fellowships are about supporting people, their potential, and their potential to transform society. It's not just about supporting the research. And you have to put together a compelling narrative about who you are, what your vision is, what your point of view is, and why they should put money into a person with that vision. And we can help you really represent your talents and ambitions in the best way possible in your personal statements. Your peers. So some of the awards that we offer peer review sessions for them. And so your peers can also be valuable as outside readers too. They can give you feedback on accessibility. Do they understand what you're talking about? Can they summarize your research plan, even if they're not in your field? If someone can't summarize your research, you're in trouble, because that means it's kind of hard to comprehend what you're talking about. Clarity. Again, they can work with you and say, this isn't clear to me. Can you fix this sentence a little bit? But also they can share ideas, also share challenges, right? They can empathize with you and say, yeah, this is a challenge for me too as an applicant. And that can be powerful to hear, that it's not just you. The problem isn't you, right? That actually the application itself is a challenge, which is something we said earlier in the presentation. And they can provide positive encouragement. I think when I'm in peer review sessions, my favorite thing is to see folks supporting each other through the application process and not being competitive with each other, because we're really just all trying to put our best foot forward and be successful. So here's an additional reason to continue getting writing support from us. This is a PhD student I've been working with on 4 different applications in the past year. And one day she mentioned that she found it really beneficial to work with both me and her advisor. And I said, can you write that down for me so I can share it with others? Because while I can try to tell you what I'm good at, I think it's useful to hear from someone else what they find effective about our advising. And so again, it's the difference between technical expertise and also the details of an actual application. She is in computer science, so I do think that being compared to ChatGPT, Google Bard, and Grammarly is a really high compliment from someone in computer science. But it is writing support, and so we do try to provide the best writing support we can for all of you. And then finally, as seniors applying to graduate school, what are some of the other benefits of getting writing support from us? And so I think that composing personal statements and research plans for these applications can do many things for you outside of the application itself. It can aid you in better understanding your goals through guided deliberative reflection. So again, why does this matter? What are you doing? What are your objectives? Some of those things may not be things that are very clear to you right now because you haven't thought through them yet. And it's okay if there are many different paths for you, right? What are those paths? Let's try to make that a little less ambiguous for you. Let's try to give you some language to be able to explain this to someone. That's going to be helpful outside of this application. We also can provide you with more practice with explaining your research to a broad audience. So how do you explain that research question? How do you talk about those methods and methodology to a broad audience who's not in your field? Those are important skills to learn because you're not always going to be talking to specialists in your field. If you become a faculty member later, you are going to be talking to faculty in other fields. And it's important to be able to have a conversation with each other about your research and reach mutual understanding with each other about what you're doing and why it matters, right? But if you aren't going into the academy, you are going into industry, well, that's a completely different audience. And they also need to be able to access what you are talking about too, right? So these are good skills to gain. Also good to be able to explain to your family what you're doing, right? How many of us have been at a barbecue where someone's like, what do you do? And you explain it and they just don't understand you, right? And so you can get a little bit better at practicing some of those skills by working on research plans with us. You can sharpen your writing skills through multiple rounds of revision and feedback. So many times I work with students who are like, I haven't written anything in 2 years. And that makes me cry at night, right? But instead, we look past that. We try to work with you on your writing. And so you can continue to improve as a writer by working with us through multiple rounds of revision and getting feedback from us on how to improve that writing. Again, we're not looking to give you an A and say, this is done. We're never touching this ever again. Instead, we're trying to make it the best document possible by the deadline. You can always keep improving writing, right? And so we just want it to be the best that it can be by the time we have to turn it in. And then it can also open more opportunities to discuss your goals and research with mentors who write your reference letters. So the folks who are writing your reference letters for graduate school, well, this is a really good time to continue to have conversations with them about your goals, about your research. And so they can say, wow, I've had so much conversation with this one student about their goals and their research that they want to do in graduate school. I have a better understanding of who they are, and now I can write a better letter, right? And so this is about facilitating those relationships and improving those relationships. And those are relationships that are so important, not just for these applications, but outside of these applications. And ultimately, all of these benefits can positively transfer to your graduate school applications. So after the NSF-GRP results were announced last year, I was talking to one of our recipients, and he shared with me that he was an undergraduate senior applying to graduate school, and he shared with me that he got into his dream program. And the reason that he got into his dream program, he said, part of it, he's excellent. He's fantastic, a fantastic student. That's why he got into his dream program. But he felt like the reason he stood out was because he worked with us intensely on his personal statement for the NSF-GRFP. And he said that translated into putting together the best personal statement he could for those graduate school applications. So there is transfer between these areas into your graduate school applications. And so while we can't help you with a specific graduate school application, because that's outside of our domain, what you work on in these materials often translates into those graduate school applications. I think that they happen side by side. And so you can advance a lot of your skills and improve your graduate school applications by working with us on these applications for these awards. So what do we offer? We offer individual advising. So we meet one-on-one, we talk with you about the award, what its expectations are, how to have a conversation with your rec letter writers about putting together a good rec letter. Sometimes these fellowships require that there's specific information in those recommendation letters. And that may not be apparent to you as a student because you've never written a recommendation letter before, right? And so we can provide some guidance on that too, as well as writing support and all the other components of the application. Many of the times that they have application portals. And so we can guide you through that process too if you have questions about that. We provide writing workshops and support, and I've talked about that extensively. And so I've already told you my spiel about that. Go past that. Just keep it in mind. And we also provide peer and individual reviews, so you can work with us one-on-one. Some of the awards, such as Fulbright and NSF-GRP, have peer review opportunities. And we provide support for most graduate level awards. So if there's another award out there that can support you in graduate study that you're thinking about applying to as a senior, come and talk to us about that application, and we'll be happy to figure out how we can support you for that. All right, so what are your next steps after attending this information session? Please research the awards. So if you're interested in the NSF-GRP, you're interested in Hertz, GEM, please go and look at the eligibility requirements, read over those, read over the deadlines, think about what your purpose is in applying for that. You can write this stuff down. Please make a list and think about the timeline. What do you need to do between now and the deadline to be able to put together a competitive application? Once you have some sense of that terrain, don't overthink it. Make an appointment with us so that we can get you started on the application, right? So for NSF-GRP applicants, I would say sooner the better. Same with Hertz. Those are both due in October. GEM due in November. We can maybe wait a little bit longer on that, but not too much longer, right? But if you are thinking about the NSF-GRP, make an appointment with me as soon as possible. Do not forget that Fulbright does not start again until next year. So if you're thinking about Fulbright, you can hold off on that for a little bit, and we'll be happy to have a conversation about that next year. And then Quad's next deadline has not been announced yet. So again, if you're interested in Quad, sign up for their newsletter on their website. And once that next cycle is announced, then we can start having a conversation about what that application process might look like. I anticipate some changes to their application process, so there may be some differences in the next application cycle. Because it is such a new award, they're probably going to change some things. Here's how you make an appointment with us. Our website has changed a little bit, but generally, that's the homepage. You can find databases on here. You can find other awards, other information, how to get started. We have all kinds of helpful information on here. If you are interested in Fulbright, tons of information, including a video that introduces you to more of that content. And then you can click on the button that says Make an Appointment. And what that appointment will look like with me is you should choose the specific award you want to apply to. However, if you're choosing Hertz, just choose a general graduate advising appointment. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any questions that we have. We have about 6 minutes left in today's presentation. What are our questions? Christine, and just as a reminder to everyone, we are still recording right now. Did you have a question, Christine? Oh, it's okay. Just go ahead and type it in the chat. All right, so Christine's question is, do we need to know what school we want to go to for a PhD to apply for these fellowships? You should have a general sense of which schools you're applying to. It doesn't have to be one specific school, but for the NSF-GRP, they are going to ask for a specific school in the application. This is hypothetical. You are not committed to going to that school if you are given an NSF-GRP. They understand that plans change based on where you get accepted, but they do ask that you choose one and you kind of align the application with that. We sometimes encourage students in their research plans to talk about 2 different schools that they could end up at. And it depends on the application. So I do think that Hertz does ask you which schools you're applying to and why. And I think GEM might also ask you for a list of those. It depends on the award, but you are not committed to any of those schools my understanding, is that it's not like you're signing anything in blood here. No one's going to show up at your door and say, you said you were going to Carnegie Mellon and you accepted at UCLA, give us back all our money, right? Instead, you just have to report and work with the foundations about where you're going and how that all comes together. So this isn't a 100% commitment, but they do want a sense of where you are thinking about going most of the time in these applications, but that will vary from award to award. Does that answer your question, Christine? Yeah, and in the case of Hertz, you do want to make sure that the schools you're applying to are a partner institution with Hertz. And just make sure with all the awards that you're thinking about applying to that it can work at the schools you're applying to. We can talk about that more one-on-one and where to find that information. What other questions do we have? Oh, I will add, Fulbright does expect you to pick a school. So if you are trying to go to graduate school through Fulbright next year, you do have to pick up one specific institution and build your application around that one specific institution. So that one will be a little bit different. Do we have any other questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat in case anyone has any questions. It is just mhabza@asu.edu. Right, if we don't have any more questions, I'm happy to let you all go today. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you in our offices soon. So again, if you're interested in applying to the NSF GRFP, Hertz, or GEM, please make an appointment with me as soon as possible so we can get you started on those applications. Have a good day, everyone. Look forward to meeting with you.